Hey, get this. It says, NASA announces new delays for first Artemis mission moon landing. Okay, well, let's just look at this. NASA announces new delays for first astronaut Artemis mission moon landing. Well, guess what it is this time? It's the heat shield. Orion heat shield concerns. So this is what this is all about. It's the heat shield yet again.
They haven't solved the problem they first discovered in December 2014. And that wasn't a lunar orbit return velocity either. It's only 80% of it. They're realizing they've got a real problem. That if you can't protect the astronauts as they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, those astronauts are probably not going to go. They're going to say, we're not going until you can fix the heat shield. Because if you don't fix it, we're dead. And we don't want to be dead.
Well, there's more than just that. People need to understand that with the current technology today, when they light those rockets, that's it. They're on. They're not being turned off again. And if you're sitting in that rocket and that countdown happens, you're going to have a hell of a lot more excitement and anxiety because there is nothing you can do to escape what's going to happen when that thing decides to have that unscheduled rapid disassembly of equipment. You'd be better off to be in the Titan because it's a hell of a lot faster than what they experienced. Like the Challenger disaster and stuff like that. It's possible that they were not killed instantly, that they could have been alive for a few more seconds and been aware of their circumstance. Bottom line is you're just as dead. And that anxiety is not going to stop. If you're going to be gone for 2 weeks, any tiny little mistake, any equipment failure, and you're dead. Maybe not instantly, but you're still dead.
Now they're saying that the reason they say they have to go back due to technical issues is because the gases are now being trapped on the inside of the heat shield, and that's heating the capsule up. So I don't understand why this worked so great on Apollo's 11 all the way to 17. And yes, 13 as well, because it still had to come back and re-enter.
And that's an aluminum craft. It's just going to dissolve.
Yeah, it melts at a low temperature, and it also reflects all of the gamma particles, and it just bounces all around the inside of the craft. So they have two problems that they're going to be dealing with now, aren't they?
Now we're back to materials. You go back to Joyce Deaver, all of the material testings in the vacuum chamber just on vacuum. And then the VUV radiation testing that they did in those chambers as well with the materials. And here again, the materials would have had to have been there in the 1960s for them to accomplish that. And we've discussed that many times over, not just the heat shields. Look at the window glass.
Same thing.
It has to handle the pressure, it has to handle the temperature differences, because that vehicle, aluminum, is going to expand and shrink, and you're going to lose the seal around the doors, around the windows, around everything.
Yeah, but it also comes in through the shield of SpaceX's new spacesuit. Have you ever seen how those visors clip down onto that rubber gasket? It comes around the back of the head, and there's two pivot points in the center, and the whole thing, the entire thing swivels down onto that gasket. Well, what I would like to know is what's sealing the pivot points? You're going to have active seals inside of there to do something, because it's going to leak right inside of the helmet. And if it leaks in the helmet, there goes your atmosphere in the suit.
Well, Joe's a much better Hollywood designer. I think the association that you're seeing between Musk and Hollywood costume designers and stuff like that, I think there's a whole lot more association with the movie studios when they're producing spacewalks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And here's another thing. It says, live, NASA speaks after postponing debut Artemis test flight of new moon rocket. Now, this was 2 years ago, and they're still having trouble with the SLS moon rocket, i.e. the shield on the craft now, which they've still been trying to repair since 2014. I remember NASA was saying they were going back in 2012.
Yeah.
Then they moved it up to 2014. Then it was 2018. Then it was 2020. Now it's 2024, and they're moving it up yet again. And yet they still don't have that Gateway space station constructed. They have 2 modules completed now. They need 5. You're telling me that they're going to have 5 modules completed by 2027? Because like Marcus just said, 2027, when they want to launch, you're not going anywhere, guys, until you get that space station up there.
And test it. You've got to test it properly. And you've got to test the rockets. And the Orion capsule's got to be tested for human flight now. Not with dummies in it. You know, Helga and Zohar, was it? They were the dummies. You can put dummies into anything. You put humans into something that doesn't work and you've got a real problem. If any humans die because of your incompetence, NASA, you're going to be deleted from the agencies. It's a sad situation. No wonder NASA are so worried, because they know if they don't get this right, their history. They're no longer going to be a space agency. There's going to be a space for a new agency.
Well, I guess maybe that's why they subcontract a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It defers the blame onto somebody else.
The thing that's always bugged me about, you know, this famous figure of 400,000 people worked for NASA or were contracted by NASA to do Apollo, and there are 20,000 companies involved. If you divide one figure into the other, you get 20 people per company. Well, Boeing has a lot more people than that. Grumman has many more people than that. So what's the number of people in each of these big companies that worked for NASA? And you've got all the other people around, you know. Are you talking about the secretaries and the drivers, security staff, cafeteria staff? You're talking about them as well? I would say the figure was probably nearer 2 million. And they all kept a secret because they didn't have any secret to keep. They didn't know what was going on. It was just a few people who knew they couldn't do it. And now we're finding out in real time that they can't do it now either. It's a very sad situation.
You know what NASA should stand for? Need another space agency.
Yeah, that's right, yes. Because not always scientifically accurate.
You know something I've never looked into?
What's that?
Like when I was looking for all kinds of documents on the construction of different parts of the vehicles and stuff, I never looked at the construction. I do have the one on the construction of the vacuum chambers, but I never thought to look at the launch pads for the specifications of the launch pads, like how thick that concrete is, how much water is flowing through them and everything else. And the same as the assembly buildings, like that huge assembly building. There's got to be PDF files and schematics on that building itself.
Oh, of course.
Because when you look at what's in the building and the equipment that's in the building, that will tell you what they're capable of building. Like if they're going to build a rocket and you see the equipment that's in that building that they're still using today, compared to what happened in '69, if they haven't made changes to the building, they're still building the same damn rockets.
That building featured in the film Fly Me to the Moon, the Scarlett Johansson film. That was used. So NASA were obviously proud of it. They allowed it to be used in the film.
Yeah, but you're going to update all of the equipment in the building. The assembly equipment in the building is going to be updated if you're going to have an updated rocket. And of course, NASA's always claim is, well, we can't use the old technology. It doesn't match the new stuff. Well, that's bullshit. It's the same building. It's the same equipment. Putting it together. You know?
And that vacuum chamber they use over at the Glenn Research Center, that was supposed to take 10% of NASA's budget to build that vacuum chamber, the Sandusky Center. I mean, 10% for one piece of kit just to test it. I mean, have you ever found any photographs or records of the Saturn V rocket being tested in the vacuum chamber? Or the lunar rover, was that ever tested in a vacuum?
There is, I think, the first or second stage or something that was tested in there from Joyce Deaver, but it had nothing to do with the fuel cells or anything else in a vacuum. It had to do with the NASA logo and the paint they were using. And they put it in a vacuum. It dried the paint out so much it just came off like a powder.
Oh, God.
That's the only thing I ever read on what they were doing in the chamber there, is testing the different paints to make sure that it doesn't come off when it hits a vacuum.
So when they got a new formulation for the paint, did they then test that in the vacuum as well?
Oh, I would think so, because those documents from Deaver tested just about any adhesive that they were using and the seals. And of course, they're barely able to get the vacuum chamber down on a chamber that size down to 10 to the minus 6. And of course, they were already showing problems with rubber seals, silicone seals, every different kind of compound seal that they use. And they know when they go past that, that they have to use metal seals, one-time use only.
But then surely in that process of testing anything, you put the item into the test chamber and see if it does what you hope it will do, i.e., well, if it's a vacuum seal, you hope it will seal. But if it doesn't, that's the process. All right, we found this doesn't work, so now let's change it and see if we can get it better. Have you ever found any documents which do that, which show that they found us a problem, like with a vacuum, and they then reformulated, say, the seal? Was that then retested? And have you ever found those documents?
No, there's nothing that qualifies past 10 to the minus 6 or even close to it. Even the adhesives and stuff that they're using, the documents from Joyce Deaver, right? Those documents were showing 10 to the minus 3, maybe 10 to the minus 4. The one adhesive is called Capton, Kapton, and that one gets down to 10 to the minus 4. After that, it fails. Well, if you don't have a better product than that, then you can't go out past 80 miles. Because that's 10 to the minus 4 at 80 miles.
So if they knew they couldn't go beyond that distance, the 80 miles, at 10 to the minus 4, and they knew the moon was going to be much greater level of vacuum, is there any documentation showing what they did to demonstrate that they could put equipment onto the lunar surface at that level of vacuum?
No, because they can't reproduce the vacuum. You can get down, like when they're doing electronics and stuff like that, a very small diameter tube, the size of a pen or something like that. You can get down to 10 to the minus 12 or whatever in a laboratory. You can pull it down that much. If it's 2 or 3 liter container, like what Bill Demos uses is what, maybe a 15 liter container is all he has for a vacuum chamber. And you look at the thickness of those walls, the way they're bolted in, and the material that they're using, the seals that they're having to use. And don't forget, they're bolting those down, even though when you put a vacuum in there, it's helping hold the lid down. It's not trying to push off. And that's the other thing. That's where we see the helmets and we go, that's not possible, because the pressure's inside pushing out away from the seal. And you never want that to happen. You want the pressure to push harder on the seal to put it together.
Of course you do, yeah.
And now you take command module door, the size, the physical size of the seal on the door.
32.
Now you apply heat.
Yeah, I mean, that door was 32 inches square.
That's got to line up perfectly. And the vehicle's being heated up and cooled down again. It's in rotisserie mode the whole time out there. That's going to work a seal back and forth together, and the seal's going to break. You need a hell of a lot more structure than that to be able to do that, or you need to design it so the door actually opens in so it pushes against the seal. And that's a huge problem, to have a door opening in on a vehicle like that, because look at the space it's going to take up just to swing the door.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to ask you, Marcus, do you remember when we were going over the Apollo retransmissions and we were going over how it was cleaned up? We had a PDF or a diagram, but what it was it was showing the transmissions going from, I believe it was Kennedy Space Center to Lookout Labs. Lookout Mountain Labs went back over to Houston, and then from Houston it went out to be rebroadcast.
I think Goldstone is quite close to Los Angeles, so it may be they're relatively close together, Goldstone and Lookout Mountain.
So maybe it was Goldstone and I got them mixed up.
Yeah, but if you're up there for 3 days, you have to be able to pick that signal up as the Earth rotates around for 3 days.
There were 3 locations they could receive it from.
Well, they claimed they were using aircraft and ships as well to pick up the signal and to resend it. So they have to have a worldwide network of being able to send and receive.
Well, there were 3 locations they could receive from. One in Madrid, one in California, one in Australia, because they're distance apart. But there are also a lot of ships and aircraft, or 8 aircraft, and 4 ships in the Pacific and 1 in the Atlantic.
That's right, to pick the signal up and relay it.
Yes. So there was obviously a lot of ships.
There would just add to a few more 100,000 people to the lists.
Yeah, it did. To be honest, I've not seen Lookout Mountain Laboratories referenced in anything NASA has produced.
There it is. I found it. It was Goldstone. So it went from Kennedy to Goldstone, Goldstone to Houston, and then it went from there over to Australia.
But the thing is the files are being updated on this, and people are commenting underneath this particular video about it. And they're saying, oh, and the high gain antenna on the rover and everything else. Well, now it's got a gain of 20.5 or whatever. It never had that. The big one that sat beside the LEM only had a gain of 12. The little one on there all of a sudden is quite a bit more capable. There must be an updated file out there. I mean, I haven't looked for updates on that for a bit, because they're obviously commenting underneath this last video about the communications. And I still want to see one that gets through the belts. We can't send a signal through it, but it comes in just fine. Except when we have somebody on the moon, then the belts, they just disappear again.
Works every time if you're on the moon.
Look at the plasma in the belts. You don't think that's going to cause a bit of interference? Just the plasma. Now let's get to the radiation part of it. Let's get to the electromagnetic waves that are bouncing signals off that they've been doing. Like the BIS has been bouncing them off since 1959. They're using shortwave radios in the Second World War to bounce off the atmosphere. I mean, come on. And everybody thinks it's bouncing off the moon all the time.
Well, it can bounce off.
I mean, I've done it.
Like I said, MIT was trying to incorporate a radio wave within a laser light for communications. Why would they want to do that if there wasn't a problem with the way it works now?
You know, personally, I still think you can do it, because I don't know what I was shooting, bouncing ham radio signals off the moon. I don't know. I mean, where was it bouncing then?
Just off the atmosphere.
Well, look at this. I mean, hey, I was sitting up on top of Mount Seymour in the late 70s and getting skipped from India on a CB radio.
Well, that's just bouncing off the atmosphere.
Yeah, that's only 27 megahertz.
But it's bouncing off. It's not going through. And that's the difference.
Yeah, but still, here's the thing with all of that stuff, with the transmissions to the moon. I really don't have any trouble with it, because it's light. It's still, radiation is light,
Like we have that graph of the radiation spectrum and what the Van Allen belts actually block. The only thing coming through is white light and a bit of UV light. Everything else is blocked. And if it didn't block it, we wouldn't be here. None of those thousands of satellites that are claimed to be in the Clark belt, I mean, they're right in the middle of the second band, the highest level of plasma. Every solar flare would simply take them out.
Assuming they weren't being shielded by the Earth itself.
Right. But at 22,000 miles out, they hit a solar flare, they're dead, and they're supposed to be running around at the equator, which is so-called by NASA as the densest part of the radiation belts, right at the equator, right?
Oh, look at Musk. That's the reason why he just launched a whole new pod of satellites, because the other ones all burnt out from that last solar flare.
Yeah, but they're only 100 miles up.
Yeah, not very far.
They're not in the belts. We're talking about stuff in the belts, the Clark belt. And just because a fiction writer worked out how to get a geostationary satellite in there, the distance and speed you have to be traveling so that it would sit in one spot over the Earth and rotate at the same speed as the surface of the Earth. That's what the Clark belt is.
The first satellite system that I actually set up myself, that was about 1995, I guess it was somewhere in there, with a new digital one I'm talking about, right? It was $5,000, and it had the Clark arc feature on it that you had to set. So you needed the last position and the first position toward the east, hit Clark arc, and it did everything itself. It worked it all out itself.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I mean, look at the number of solar flares we've had over the years.
Still, that Clark arc feature was pretty cool, though. I mean, it picked up every single one of those satellites as it was going, and it would list them up on the screen. The guy gave me a map, so with the last coordinate and the first coordinate. And then he came out with one of these satellite things, whatever. Yeah, it's in his hand, right? And he's putting it up, holding it up like this. He's taking some readings, writes it down on the paper, and then he says, this is what you program into the... And then when I did it, he just then hit Clark arc feature. You can watch the dishes just going really slowly like this. As it picked up every satellite that it could find, and then stored it into memory, and you're done. There was no tweaking the dish or anything. It did everything for you. controlled the motors and the whole 9 yards. So, and it found whichever ones we could get that were not too far over to the east this way.
How big was that dish?
22.5-foot
Diameter one.
2
Yeah.
foot. Yeah.
That comment you mentioned about Lookout Mountain Laboratory, I remember reading it, one of the comments. Were they saying that Lookout Mountain Laboratory had nothing to do with it?
That's right.
They obviously don't know what Lookout Mountain Laboratory was actually doing.
No, I meant to say Goldstone. I got the two mixed up. Yeah, it was just the rebroadcast. As I just looked it up now here, right? It was Goldstone. I get those two mixed up. So I just told the guy, I said, sorry, got them mixed up. And of course, you know what will happen, right? Of course, when we admit that we were wrong or we said something, they'll just crucify you.
Standard procedure, isn't it? Yeah. They think they found us out, in the hundreds of hours of films that you created. You make occasional mistakes. Hang on, don't NASA make mistakes as well? Of course they do. Everybody makes mistakes.
But Goldstone, it's like you said, Goldstone is pretty much a stone's throw away from Lookout Mountain Labs. I mean, Goldstone's down in the valley. Lookout Mountain's a little higher up on the hill.
Yeah, just north of Los Angeles.
And there's always a McDonald's nearby that could become vacant and they can put the film in.
Yeah, why would that have been stored there is beyond me. And the funny thing is, when you look at the video, guess what's right behind that McDonald's? Menlo Park.
Yep.
The only thing that I find that's really unusual is why would a McDonald's close?
They left the fryers there. They left the
everything was there.
It's all there.
It's like they just turned the lights off and walked out the door.
Yeah.
Everything is in that thing. There's no way that they would leave it like that.
You know how much those commercial fryers are worth? They left the grill, they left the hood fans, they left everything. And they left the chairs, the counters, the salad containers. Everything's still in that restaurant. It's just like you said, they shut the lights off and walked out, and NASA walked in.
Yeah, NASA obviously just rented the whole place.
You take a look at the stainless steel counters alone, man.
What I thought was really strange is that here they are with that blimp hangar right behind that McDonald's. So what are the chances that they're going to use that McDonald's? I think it would be pretty high, because if they were doing some of the shots in that hangar, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to try to find some place to store that's close by, that they don't have to, let's just put it this way, expedite so that it can get into the wrong hands. They could just walk it right across and hide it there.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, we don't know how long that McDonald's has been vacant for, or if they were hiding that stuff there even before. It's a hard one. It's just very strange that they would have that within a walking distance of that McDonald's.
Guess what? In the 60s, McDonald's wouldn't have been open for very long as far as a chain of restaurants. It's a fairly new building when they took it over. If they bought up all the properties around it, it probably wasn't viable for McDonald's to be located there anymore. Yeah, they probably just purchased the whole thing right up as a development. That wouldn't be viable for them because it's not in a downtown area or anything else.
Is it a fluke or is it a coincidence?
There's no such thing as coincidence.
Well, fluke and a coincidence are the same thing. So is it a coincidence or did it just happen that way?
Well, you'd think that surely they've searched all those cans, the film cans that they had there, or whatever they contained, to find the missing tapes. Or have they not got a machine that can play them? That's their excuse now.
Yeah, but they had them. They played them right in that restaurant. They brought a machine in and sat down and tweaked it up and ran the footage right through it right there.
Then they cleaned the machine and couldn't put it back together, so they threw it out.
Well, that's what they say, but where's the evidence? Well, the evidence is in that video of those guys running that machine with the original film through it.
Yeah, well, the thing is about that particular area right there, they needed to do orbital simulations, and that's what they would have needed that for.
Oh, yeah.
But when you even had the Gemini simulators and that, when they were filming and practicing, had docking and undocking sequences, right? And they're just up on wires and they just rotate them a little bit this way and that way and then click together. They were doing all those simulations. That's what they needed a hangar for.
Oh, my God. I was watching a documentary yesterday, and they were saying that it would be impossible to fake the moon landings because there wasn't a warehouse that was big enough to accommodate a stage. And I'm thinking, oh, really? Let's take a look at the Gemini simulator. Do you realize how big that area was inside of that hangar? Well, I'm going to show it. People are getting a little smarter these days, because even some people that I used to work with, let's just put it that way, even those guys that started to laugh at me saying that this was fake, and of course I tried to reason with them and tell them why, but they won't listen. They wouldn't listen. Now that they're seeing all of these failures with this Artemis mission, which was supposed to have been on the lunar surface end of this year, 2024, the Artemis mission that was supposed to go around the moon with humans was supposed to happen at the end of this year. Well, we're here already. Where is it? And again, we go back to 2020. They were supposed to be on the moon already. What happened? Every time NASA kicks the can down the road another 5 years, because that's pretty much what it is. It's almost 2025, so let's just say 4.5 years. They're still goofing around. They send dummies around the moon. Anybody can send a dummy around the moon, or stick a dummy on a balloon and drop them and test. The dummy's not going to get hurt, but people are going to die if you screw up. And I think this is the reason why they're really scared, especially now that they're claiming that all of that gas is now being trapped behind the shield on Artemis, and it's heating up the aluminum capsule. Well, that's not going to be very good, is it? That's going to start roasting people inside, melting the capsule, and you're dead. You know, maybe it was a good thing. But again, why didn't the gases get trapped underneath the shield on Apollo? You have to start asking these questions. Now these ones that were laughing at me are starting to think, and it's not so funny anymore.
Because they suddenly realize they've been lied to for so long. They believed it, and they're saying to themselves, why did I believe it for so long? It just takes one little thought. You know, somebody came along and said, hang on a minute, what's going on here? We could do it 50 years ago. We don't seem to be able to do it now. It should be much easier. You know, it's the old thing. You know, Charles Lindbergh flew the Atlantic in 1927, solo across the Atlantic. Within a few years, passengers were paying to fly across the Atlantic. And now thousands of people every day fly across the Atlantic. They don't think about it. But going to the moon? No. Done it once, couldn't do it again.
Not only that, just look at low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
If we're so capable in low Earth orbit, you're talking about transportation on the Earth. We're so capable in low Earth orbit. Why hasn't it been commercialized just the same way? Why don't we have restaurants up there? Why don't we have hotels? Why don't we have a tourist destination to go up there and fly around? We've been doing it for so-called ever.
Yeah, and then you have a problem like this. Remember last week we were going over this? This was a photograph, and it's AS17-133-20347. Now, when you look at the video of this, you'll notice that there's two objects on the other side of this little ridge or crater. And that crater, the rocks that are in the foreground are not the same rocks that are in the pictures. Yet the ones that are in the background are the same. All the rocks are the same, except for the ones in the foreground. And as a matter of fact, there's quite a few rocks that are missing between the two.
That's a pretty weird picture in itself. Highly detailed foreground, blank background, with a very distinct dividing line.
This is the one with the two lounging chairs up on the hillside.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah.
And the V-cut rock here, that's just beautiful.
Oh, they're beautifully laid out, those rocks. No dust on them.
No lunar dust. I have no idea what kind of a pipe this is laying across there. It must be a sewage pipe or something going into here.
Now I'm going to show you the video of that.
Oh, yes. They're completely different here on the set.
There aren't any rocks in the foreground.
I want to show you the whole thing, all the sweep right across, because that's ridiculous. It was called Apollo 17 on the Shoulder of Giants, and that would be this one right here. Okay. Now watch this. There's those two rocks up here.
And that's supposed to be 17.
That's 17, yeah.
Yeah, the hills in the background are the same as the ones in the still photograph. That's completely different foreground.
Yeah. Where's all the rocks? Like, by the way, look at this. What's this big barrel doing there?
I don't know. That's pretty smooth surface on that other piece.
And then we were looking at this rock.
That shows up in Apollo 16.
Yeah, I'm serious. This shows up in Apollo 16. So where's all these rocks that were lining all this? But the perspective to me is right off, because there's the two rocks here, and there they are there.
You'd think that big rock on the left-hand side would be in both pictures, because it's quite large, quite distinctive.
From that video right there, you can see it's an exact copy of the mountain behind. You see it's on the far side where the two rocks are sitting there that look like big lawn chairs, right? Big couches. The mountains are exactly the same. It's the same bloody crater.
There they are there, there they are there. Well, then you would see that barrel right over here then on the corner.
Yeah, well, it's not there.
It's not there.
The other little divot in the crater has been added to it and stuff.
Where's all the rocks?
Well, that's 48. Then it changes after that. You only have the two photographs.
That goes to this rock here.
That's right.
Well, that's not this.
No, that's none of it's that.
None of it, because these guys are right up against this ridge, which would mean that they would be right over in here somewhere, standing on the rocks.
You still see the rocks in the foreground.
Yeah, where are they all? We've still never been able to find this.
Yeah.
You can't get any further than this ridge. They're right at the end of it here.
Yeah, it is. That rock should be in the photograph as well, and it's not.
Geez, that's really strange. Well, that's just another anomaly to add to the growing list. To the growing list. To the growing list. To the growing list.